Okay, let's start. Number 1. Baphomet. The year is 1307. The date is October 13th, a Friday. You are Jacques de Molay, Grand Master of the Knights Templar, and before the sun has broken over Paris, King Philip IV's soldiers are moving through every city, town, and provincial outpost in France, simultaneously acting on sealed orders distributed weeks earlier to every royal seneschal in the kingdom. By dawn, 15,000 Knights Templar are in custody. The charge is apostasy. The specific allegation, named in the official Inquisition documents, the Templars worshipped an idol called Baphomet. The scale of the operation requires attention. Philip's administration needed simultaneous arrests because the Templars maintained military fortifications, a banking network that predated most European national financial systems, and a communication infrastructure that could have triggered organized resistance if even one precinct received warning. The operation required 4 years of planning. A Templar informant Escu de Flyran of Béziers, who offered his intelligence first to James II of Aragon and a papal order from Clement V, obtained under conditions the Church's own records describe only as persistent urging. Every provincial arrest happened the same morning. No Templar escaped to warn another. The mainstream explanation is financial. Philip IV owed the Templars an amount the royal treasury could not service. He had already expelled France's Jewish population in 1306 and absorbed their assets. The Templar suppression followed the same administrative logic. The Baphomet charges along with accusations of trampling the cross and denying Christ at initiation were extracted under torture, as the Inquisition records document explicitly. No physical idol named Baphomet was produced in evidence at any Templar proceeding. This explanation accounts for the motive. It does not account for what the Pope knew. In 2001, Vatican Secret Archives researcher Barbara Frail discovered a document that had been misfiled under the wrong index heading since 1628. The document is now known as the Chinon Parchment, dated August 17 through 20th, 1308. It records Pope Clement V conducting private sessions with Jacques de Molay and the Templar senior leadership at the castle of Chinon. In these sessions, Clement personally heard the Templars' descriptions of their initiation rites. The document records his finding. The Templars had practiced aliqua inhonesta, certain indecorous things, but were not guilty of heresy. Clement V privately absolved them. He then allowed Philip IV to burn them. The Vatican published the Chinon Parchment as a facsimile edition in 2007 7 volumes titled Processus contra Templarios, available through Libreria Editrice Vaticana. The Vatican Secret Archives holds the original. You can request a copy. The Templars had garrisoned Jerusalem beginning in 1119 CE. For 9 years, under the direct oversight of King Baldwin II, they excavated beneath the Temple Mount, specifically beneath Solomon's Stables, the subterranean complex directly below where the first temple had stood. What they removed has no surviving inventory outside the order. Philip IV's 1307 asset confiscation records, held at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, document quantities of gold, specie, and objects, catalogued only as of uncertain identification. The cipher applied to the accusation itself is documented. In the 1850s, analysts applying the Atbash cipher, a Hebrew letter substitution system used in the Book of Jeremiah and in use at Qumran to the name Baphomet, produced the transliterated output Sophia. Sophia is the Gnostic term for divine wisdom, the pre-creation emanation that Gnostic theology places before the God of Genesis. The implication the cipher produces is not that the Templars were worshipping a demon. The implication is that they had encountered something whose description Clement V heard in private, absolved, and then allowed to be burned so that no one else would describe it. Clement heard what they found. He said nothing. On March 18, 1314, Jacques de Molay was burned alive on the Île Juifsa, small island in the Seine, visible from the towers of Notre Dame. 5 contemporary chroniclers recorded that, before the flames reached him, he issued a public curse against Clement V and Philip IV by name, stating both would answer before God's tribunal within a year. Clement V died April 20th, 1314, 33 days later. Philip IV died November 29th, 1314. The entity they could not destroy they kept hidden. The being described in the Book of Enoch as the commander of 200 celestial beings who descended to a named mountain and swore a formal oath before landing the Vatican, tried a different approach with that entity. They buried the book that named him. Number 2. The Watchers. The year is 1946. You are Muhammad ed-Dihib, a 15-year-old Bedouin shepherd of the Ta'amir tribe, and you have lost a goat in the limestone cliffs above the northwestern shore of the Dead Sea. The cliff face is riddled with caves. You throw a stone into one of them to drive the animal out. Instead of a goat, you hear pottery shattering. Inside Cave 1 at Qumran, stacked in clay jars wrapped in linen, are texts that have been sealed for roughly 1900 years. Over the following months, 7 scrolls are removed from the cave and sold to 2 antiquities dealers in Bethlehem. One set reaches Eleazar Sukanik, a Hebrew University archaeologist who recognizes immediately that the documents are ancient. The other set reaches Mar Samuel, Archbishop of the Syrian Orthodox Church, who eventually places an advertisement in the Wall Street Journal on June 1, 1954, seeking a buyer. Yagael Yadin, Sukanik's son, purchases them for $250,000 through a shell intermediary. Between 1947 and 1956, systematic excavation reveals 11 caves at Qumran. Cave 4 alone contains more than 15,000 individual fragments representing 900 separate manuscripts. Among them, 7 complete or partial copies of the Book of Enoch, catalogued as 4Q Enoch A through 4Q Enoch G. The photographs are held at the Israel Antiquities Authority. You can request access to the archive. The Book of Enoch had not been part of any Christian Bible since the 4th century CE. The Vatican's institutional response followed a specific pattern. In 1952, the Pontifical Biblical Commission established an oversight role in the International Taka publication team based at the École Biblique in Jerusalem, a Catholic institution. Father Roland de Vaux, director of the École Biblique, was appointed chief editor of the Cave 4 publication project. The complete scholarly publication of the Cave 4 corpus was not available to the general academic community until 1992, 45 years after discovery. During that period, access to unpublished manuscripts required institutional approval that ran through ecclesiastical channels. What the Book of Enoch contains is specific. 200 beings, referred to in the text as watchers in Aramaic, Aaron descended to a mountain called Hermon. The text records that before landing, the beings swore an oath to one another because they were afraid of what they were about to do and its consequences. They were led by Semjaza. His lieutenant was Azazel. Mount Hermon is a real geographic location. It rises to 9,232 feet on the current border of Syria and Lebanon, with its southern slope in Israeli-administered territory. The name derives from the Hebrew cherem, meaning under a ban or devoted to destruction. The mountain's name, in the language of the people who named it, means the place where something forbidden was done. The Watchers are described as transmitting specific technical knowledge to human beings. Azazel taught the forging of swords, shields, and breastplates, and the preparation of cosmetics simultaneously. Semjaza transmitted enchantment and herb cutting. Barakiel taught astrology. Arakiel taught earth signs. Tamiel taught astronomy. The Enoch text dates these transmissions to a period that aligns, in the archaeological record, with the simultaneous emergence of metallurgy and organized warfare, what the stratigraphic sequence identifies as the late Neolithic transition. The connection is not argued by the Enoch text. The Enoch text simply states what happened and when. 11 independent manuscript copies of the Enoch text recovered at Qumran. In a community where writing materials were sufficiently scarce that scribes scraped old surfaces to reuse them, 11 copies of a single document indicates canonical status. The Qumran community treated it as scripture. The suppression campaign predates the Qumran discovery by 15 centuries. The Council of Laodicea, meeting in 363 to 364 CE, issued Canon 60, a list of books approved for public ecclesiastical reading. The Book of Enoch was not among them. Pope Gelasius I, in the Gelasian decree of approximately 494 CE, listed it explicitly as apocryphal and prohibited. In the 1520s, Portuguese Jesuit missionaries operating in Ethiopia, where the Ethiopian Orthodox Church had maintained the Book of Enoch as canonical scripture for more than 1,000 years, confiscated and destroyed copies in the course of their conversion campaigns. In 1773, the Scottish traveler James Bruce returned from Ethiopia with 3 complete copies of the text. He deposited one at the Bodleian Library in Oxford. The Vatican received a copy through institutional channels by 1838. They had spent 15 centuries suppressing a document describing 200 named beings who landed on a real named, visitable mountain after swearing an oath to one another, and then someone brought them a copy. The watchers are described in the Enoch text as currently imprisoned, bound beneath hills and deserts, awaiting judgment. Their leader's name appears 4 times in the Hebrew of Leviticus. The Vatican's authorized translators rendered it as a concept. Number 3. Azazel. The year is 1896. You are Solomon Schechter, a Romanian-born Jewish scholar and vice president of the Cambridge Theological Society, and you are standing in a windowless storage room in the attic of the Ben Ezra Synagogue in the Fustat district of Old Cairo. The room contains approximately 300,000 individual manuscript fragments. They have been accumulating here by Jewish religious custom, which prohibits the destruction of any text containing the name of God for roughly 1,000 years. You are here because 2 fragments were brought to Cambridge 6 months earlier and identified as coming from a very early Hebrew text of Ecclesiasticus, a document previously thought to survive only in Greek. You have negotiated permission from the synagogue's community to examine the full collection. You will spend 3 weeks in Cairo. You will ship approximately 193,000 fragments back to Cambridge, where they now constitute the Taylor-Scheichter Geniza collection at Cambridge University Library. Among the thousands of Leviticus fragments in the collection, the Hebrew reads the same way that a 2nd century BCE leather fragment from Cave 11 at Qumran, the Temple Scroll, reads. The word in Leviticus 16, where every major Christian Bible prints scapegoat, is La Azazel. To Azazel, it is a proper name. It appears 4 times in the same chapter. The Yom Kippur ritual described in Leviticus 16 is operationally specific. 2 goats are selected. Lots are cast. 1 goat is sacrificed to the Lord. The other goat has the sins of Israel transferred onto it by the high priest, who lays both hands on its head. The goat is then driven, La Azazel, to Azazel. The Mishnah, in Tractate Yoma, identifies the destination as Beit Hadudo, a site 12 Roman miles east of Jerusalem. There is a cliff there. The goat was driven to the edge and pushed off. The Mishnah records, and pushed off. The Mishnah records an additional detail. A crimson thread was tied to the cliff face before the goat's descent. According to Tractate Yoma and Josephus's Jewish Antiquities, this thread turned white upon the goat's death each year, signal that the ritual had been accepted. For 40 years before the destruction of the temple in 70 CE, the crimson thread did not turn white. The Talmud records this and asks no further question. The mainstream translation decision has a documented rationale. Jerome, translating the Hebrew into Latin for the Vulgate in the late 4th century CE, rendered La Azazel as Caper Emissarius, the emissary goat, which became scapegoat in English. Jerome's reasoning, set out in his Commentarioli in Samos, is that Azazel describes the goat's function rather than a proper name of an entity. The King James Bible, the Douai Rhymes, the New American Bible, and every subsequent Catholic authorized translation follow Jerome's decision. One modern translation, the Revised Standard Version, reads, for Azazel. The rest do not. 400 years of official translation, consistent across Catholic and Protestant traditions that agreed on almost nothing else. The entity whose name was rendered as a concept in Leviticus is identified with specificity in the Book of Enoch. Azazel is described as Semjaz's lieutenant, the Watcher, most directly responsible for transmitting weapons technology and cosmetics to human beings simultaneously. His specific teachings, the forging of swords, shields, and breastplates, and the preparation of eyeshadow, jewelry, and ornaments. The Enoch text characterizes these transmissions as equivalent in their damage to human civilization. Violence and vanity, delivered by the same being in the same exchange. The punishment described is geographic and precise. The archangel Raphael is instructed to bind Azazel, hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness in the desert of Dudael. He is to be covered with rough and jagged rocks, and left there, face-covered, in darkness, until the day of judgment. The Enoch text specifies that the sins of the world are to be ascribed to Azazel, formally assigned to him as their originating cause. The Yom Kippur ritual, read through the Enoch text's geography, is not symbolic. The goat was being physically sent to a location 12 miles east of Jerusalem where a specific entity was imprisoned under rocks. The crimson thread confirmed its arrival. The sins were considered delivered. The Taylor-Scheichter Geniza collection is held at Cambridge University Library. More than 1.5 million digital images of the manuscripts are publicly accessible through the Geniza Research Unit's online catalog. The Leviticus fragments are listed. The word La Azazel is present in the manuscript images. Jerome translated it in the 4th century CE, the same decades the Council of Laodicea removed the Book of Enoch from the approved canon, the same period in which the text identifying the entity whose name appeared in Leviticus was being formally suppressed. The entity whose name was removed from Leviticus had offspring. They appear in Genesis. The Vatican's own doctrinal authorities have confirmed the offspring were real. Number 4. The Nephilim. The year is 1947. You are John Marco Allegro, a doctoral candidate at Oxford who has just begun studying Semitic languages, and within the decade you will become one of 8 international scholars assigned to translate the fragments recovered from Cave 4 at Qumran. It is the most significant document discovery of the 20th century. You will be the only non-Catholic among the team's core members. Cave 4 is not a single document. It is 15,000 individual fragments representing approximately 900 manuscripts. The scrolls include every book of the Hebrew Bible except Esther, commentary texts, hymns, rule documents, and what the publication team will eventually call the parabiblical texts documents that describe events in biblical history with details. Not present in the canonical Bible. Among the Cave 4 fragments, multiple manuscript copies of a text identified as the Book of Giants. The Book of Giants names specific Nephilim. It gives them individual histories. It describes their dreams about the flood coming to destroy them, and their attempts to interpret those dreams. The Nephilim in the text are not a metaphor or a spiritual category. They are individuals with names. Ohia, Hahia, Maweh. The text describes them sending messages through Enoch to the divine tribunal that has sentenced them, asking for intercession. They understood what was happening was judicial a formal sentence, carried out by agents acting under institutional authority. The publication schedule for Cave 4 did not make the full corpus available to the general scholarly community until 1992. 45 years elapsed between discovery and complete publication. During this period, the Pontifical Biblical Commission maintained formal oversight through the École Biblique in Jerusalem. John Marco Allegro documented deliberate suppression first in a 1956 letter to Frank Moore Cross at Harvard Divinity School, then publicly in his 1970 book, The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross, which effectively ended his academic career. His colleagues published a letter in the Times of London distancing themselves from his conclusions. The Cave 4 fragments Allegro described were eventually published and confirmed the content he had reported. What the canonical text already says requires no disputed document. Genesis 6 verse 4 reads, There were Nephilim in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The phrase, and also after that, is a chronological assertion. The Nephilim were not eliminated by the flood. Numbers 13 verse 33 records Israelite scouts reporting Nephilim in Canaan at the time of the Exodus, placing them centuries after the flood, geographically adjacent to the covenant land. The canonical text asserts their continuity across the one event traditionally understood to have terminated everything. The Catechism of the Catholic Church addresses the category directly. Sections 394 and 395 identify the sons of God in Genesis 6 as fallen angels and characterize the Nephilim as the hybrid offspring of angelic and human parentage. The current catechism was promulgated by Pope John Paul II in 1992. It is the official theological reference of the Catholic Church. The Vatican's position is that the Nephilim were real. In 1894, the Smithsonian Institution's Bureau of Ethnology commissioned a systematic survey of mound complexes across the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys. Archaeologist Cyrus Thomas's report, published in 1902, documented excavations of multiple burial mound sites containing skeletal remains of unusually large stature ranging from 7 to nearly 8 feet in length, with several instances noting double rows of teeth. The report is available through the Smithsonian's digital archive. The remains it documented are not. Information requests submitted to the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of Natural History, referencing the skeletal remains cataloged in the Cyrus Thomas survey, have received a consistent institutional response. No longer available for examination. No longer available is not the same as destroyed. It is a locational assertion. It confirms the items existed. It declines to specify where they are. The Book of Giants. Fragments are held at the Israel Antiquities Authority and the Jordan Museum in Amman. They are photographed in the Dead Sea Scrolls Digital Library, maintained jointly by the Leon Levi Foundation and the Israel Antiquities Authority. The relevant catalog entries are accessible in the digital archive today. The text names Ahia and Hahia Nephilim, who dreamed of their extinction, and sent a petition asking whether any of them would survive. Their petition is there in the archive. You can read it. The Smithsonian Mound reports measured their physical dimensions. The Vatican's Catechism acknowledges their theological reality. The Dead Sea Scrolls give several of them individual names. The Nephilim are named in Scripture. The entity who appears in the oldest surviving Hebrew manuscripts of Isaiah is not named in any Vatican-authorized Bible. She was removed from it. Number 5. Lilith. The year is 1947. You are Father Roland de Vaux, director of the École Biblique in Jerusalem, and you are among the first scholars to examine the contents of Cave 1 at Qumran before the formal excavation team is assembled. One of the 7 initial scrolls, the Great Isaiah Scroll, is 24 feet long and contains the complete text of Isaiah. It is the oldest surviving manuscript of any biblical book. It is approximately 1,000 years older than any previously known Hebrew Isaiah text. In chapter 34, verse 14, the Great Isaiah Scroll contains a word that King James's translators in 1611 rendered as screech owl. That word is spelled lamed yod tav, in Hebrew. Lilith. It is not a description of a bird. Cave 4 produced a second document, a fragment titled by its editors, Wiles of the Wicked Woman. The document describes a feminine figure who lurks at the entrances to buildings, who seduces men, whose home is in the depths of the night, who leads men toward death. The description matches with specific verbal parallels the Babylonian Lilitu figure documented in cuneiform tablets from approximately 2000 BCE, specifically the Gilgamesh Appendix and the Arslan Tash amulets from northern Syria. The Qumran scribes were writing about a category of being their textual tradition had been tracking for at least 2,000 years before them. The Isaiah Scroll is held at the Shrine of the Book in Jerusalem, a wing of the Israel Museum built specifically to house it. A full digital facsimile is publicly available through the Israel Museum's online archive. In the facsimile of the column corresponding to Isaiah 34, the word Lilith is legible to anyone who reads Hebrew. The translation decision made by Jerome, by the King James translators, and by every subsequent Catholic authorized text is visible as a decision. The word is in the manuscript. The translation does not reproduce it. You can view the facsimile without institutional credentials. The translation history is specific and consistent. Jerome's Vulgate, 4th century CE. Lamia, a creature from Greek mythology associated with the killing of children. King James Version, 1611. Screech owl. New International Version. Night creatures. New American Bible, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops translation. The night creature. The New Jerusalem Bible, prepared under Catholic auspices at the École Biblique in Jerusalem. Lilith, the only major Catholic translation to preserve the proper name. Every other authorized version renders a proper noun as a common one. The pre-Masoretic tradition contains more than Isaiah 34. The alphabet of Ben Sira is a compilation of midrashic commentary assembled between the 8th and 11th centuries CE. It is not canonical. It is, however, a document of the continuous interpretive tradition. It states that Lilith was the first woman created from the earth simultaneously with Adam, not from his rib who refused subordination, because she was made from the same earth and therefore Adam's equal. When the disagreement was not resolved, she spoke the ineffable name of God and flew from the garden. 3 angels Sanoi, Sansanoi, and Semengalef were dispatched to return her. She refused. The text records her negotiated position. She would be permitted to operate against unprotected children. She agreed never to harm a child bearing an amulet inscribed with the 3 angels' names. This is not theology. It is a containment protocol. The Talmud Bavli, Tractate Shabbat, provides operational guidance without theological explanation. A man should not sleep alone in a house, for Lilith seizes upon whoever sleeps alone in a house. The Talmud offers this as a practical precaution. It does not explain why the precaution is necessary. The reader is expected to know. What the Zohar adds is structurally precise. The 13th century Kabbalistic text identifies Lilith as the feminine counterpart of Samael the angelic regent. That same Kabbalistic tradition associates with Rome and with institutional temporal authority. The pairing is not incidental. Samael governs through institutional structures. Lilith governs through what institutional structures do not acknowledge. The oldest surviving Hebrew Isaiah manuscript preserves her name in a verse that describes the desolation of Edom, a land made waste, given over to owls and ravens and night creatures, where nothing of order remains. The translators chose to make her an owl. The digital facsimile of the Isaiah scroll is accessible at the Israel Museum's website. The word Lilith is in the manuscript at Isaiah 34, verse 14. The translation decision made by 4 centuries of authorized versions is visible in the comparison. The entity whose name was removed from authorized scripture cannot be removed from the oldest surviving manuscript in which it appears. The entity in the following section was too embedded in official scripture to remove at all. He is the only named demon in canonical Catholic scripture confirmed there by the Council of Trent in 1546. Number 6. Asmodeus. The year is 1952. You are Gabriel Amorth, a 19-year-old seminary student at a Salesian college in Turin, and you are reading the 3rd chapter of the Book of Tobit as part of your curriculum. The book is canonical Catholic scripture. It was confirmed as canonical by the Council of Trent in April 1546. Against Protestant challenges, Luther had removed it from his German Bible in 1534. The Trent Fathers voted to keep it. It appears in every Catholic Bible printed since. In chapter 3, verse 8, you encounter the most specific passage you have yet read in any canonical text. A woman named Sarah, in the city of Ecbatana in Media, has been married 7 times. Each husband died on the wedding night, before the marriage was consummated. The text names the responsible entity, Asmodeus. The description, the worst of demons. Not a demon, the worst demon. In canonical Catholic scripture, the Book of Tobit's pre-Christian age is confirmed by the Dead Sea Scrolls. Cave 4 yielded Aramaic and Hebrew versions of Tobit, dated paleographically to the 1st and 2nd centuries BCE. The fragments predate any Christian doctrinal dispute about the book's canonical status by 200 years. In the Aramaic versions, the entity is Ashmedai, a name with roots in the Persian Ishmadiva, the Zoroastrian demon of wrath documented in the Avesta. He appears in the oldest surviving versions of the text, before any Christian institution existed to include or exclude him. The relevant catalog entries are publicly searchable at the Israel Antiquities Authority's digital archive. You can view the fragments. The procedure the Book of Tobit prescribes is specific. The archangel Raphael instructs Tobias, who will become Sarah's 8th husband, to burn the heart and liver of a Nile perch on smoking coals in the wedding chamber during the wedding night. The smoke drives Asmodeus to the uttermost parts of Egypt, where Raphael follows him and binds him there. Particular materials, particular combustion method, geographically located result. It is a protocol, the Testament of Solomon, a demonological text compiled between the 2nd and 5th centuries CE, places Asmodeus under direct questioning by Solomon. He appears with 3 heads of bulls, a ram's, and a man's and a serpent's tail, mounted on a dragon carrying a vessel of fire. His domains, under questioning: arithmetic, astronomy, and geomancy. His specific activity against humans: preventing consummation on wedding nights by killing the husband. His claim to authority: Aquarius. Father Amorth became the Vatican's chief exorcist. He served under Vatican institutional authorization for 36 years, appointed by Pope John Paul II. He conducted an estimated 70,000 exorcism sessions. He was the founding president of the International Association of Exorcists, established in 1990. He testified in his books An Exorcist Tells His Story and An Exorcist, More Stories, that Asmodeus was encountered in specifically diagnosable cases on multiple occasions across his career. He described the encounters in clinical terms. His institutional authorization was never revoked. The Rituale Romanum is the official manual of Catholic ritual procedures. The original edition, promulgated by Pope Paul V in 1614, contains the exorcism protocol in 21 pages. The 1999 revised edition, promulgated by Pope John Paul II, contains 84 pages. 21 pages in 1614, 84 pages in 1999. The additional categories introduced in the 1999 revision include protocols for entities present in legions, multiple entities within a single subject, simultaneously entities that survive initial exorcism, entities that imitate divine presence to obstruct the exorcist's identification, and entities that claim jurisdictional authority over specific geographic or institutional domains. These are taxonomic categories. The institution added them because practitioners required them in documented cases. Father Amorth publicly expressed concern about the 1999 revision. He considered several of its provisions weaker than the 1614 original, particularly those addressing prolonged cases. He continued to use the 1614 text in practice. The Vatican did not discipline him for this. The question that the ritual's expansion produces is not theological, it is operational. An institution expands its procedural manual when its practitioners encounter conditions the existing manual does not cover. Between 1614 and 1999, something required 4 times as many pages. Asmodeus cannot be removed from Catholic canon because the institution confirmed his presence there at its highest doctrinal level. The Council of Trent's decision is structurally irreversible by institutional design. He is in the canon because the Church voted to put him there. The hunt is internal. The creature in the following section was never hunted. He was worn. Number 7. Dagon. The year is 1843. You are Sir Austin Henry Layard, a 26-year-old English barrister who has abandoned his legal career for archaeology, and you are standing in a trench at the site of ancient Nimrud, 22 miles south of Mosul, in what is now northern Iraq. Your workers are uncovering carved stone relief panels approximately 9 feet tall. They depict human figures wearing robes fashioned from Fish the Fish's. Head forms an open-mouthed cap, sitting atop the human head. The fish's body draping down the figure's back, the human face visible through the open jaw. Layard's field notes, published in 1849 as Nineveh and its Remains, identify these figures as priests of Dagon. His identification is correct. The relief panels are in the British Museum's Room 6, on permanent display since 1852. You can see them during standard opening hours. Dagon's historical record extends further than the biblical encounters. Tablets from Tel Marduk in Syria, dated approximately 2500 BCE, document Dagon as the most important deity in the Eblate pantheon more than 1,000 years before the Philistine associations, the Hebrew Bible records. In the Ugaritic texts of the 14th through 12th centuries BCE, Dagon is named as the father of Baal. He maintained major temples at Gaza and at Ashdod, both named in Scripture. He was worshipped continuously across northern Syria and the Levant for at least 2,000 years before the biblical period and 500 years after it. The canonical encounter is recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 5 with architectural specificity. The Philistines capture the Ark of the Covenant at the Battle of Aphek and bring it to the Temple of Dagon at Ashdod. The morning after the Ark's arrival, the temple priests find the statue of Dagon lying face forward on the temple floor before the Ark. They stand it upright again. The following morning, the statue is again lying face forward before the Ark, but this time the statue's head and both its hands have been severed and are lying on the threshold. The text specifies the architectural location. Only the stump of Dagon was left to him. It then records a practice maintained by Dagon's priests at Ashdod afterward. They do not step on the threshold unto this day. The threshold where the hands were found carries a prohibition maintained in physical memory of that morning. In 1853, Alexander Hislop, a Free Church of Scotland minister, published The Two Babylons. He argued, with supporting illustrations, that the Catholic bishop's mitre derives from the open-mouthed fish head headdress worn by Dagon's priests in the Nimrod reliefs. The mitre's characteristic cleft at the top, in his argument, represents the open mouth of the fish. The 2 peaks represent the upper and lower jaw. The fish body drapes behind in both the Nimrod figure and the episcopal vestment. The mainstream counterposition is documented. Hislop's methodology has been characterized by historians as tendentious, his etymological chains unreliable, his dating inconsistent. His broader argument about Catholic institutional continuity with Babylonian religion polemical rather than scholarly. The academic consensus is that the Catholic mitre derives from the pallium worn by Roman civil officials of the late imperial period, independently of any Mesopotamian influence. The counterarguments are credentialed and specific. In 1853, the same year Hislop published his book, the British Museum produced plaster casts of the Nimrod fish priest panels and distributed them to major European institutions. The Vatican received a set. The institution that received physical reproductions of Dagon priest iconography in 1853 has not issued any public statement addressing the specific visual comparison Hislop documented in the same year. Not in 1853. Not in the 170 years since. The British Museum reliefs are viewable today. Room 6 is open during standard hours. The Nimrod fish priest stands behind glass with an accession placard. A photograph of the figure placed adjacent to a photograph of a Catholic bishop in full vestments produces the comparison Hislop documented. The comparison is available to anyone with a camera in Room 6 of the British Museum and access to a Google image search. The mainstream explanation for the mitres' origin is independent of Mesopotamian influence. The institution that wore the mitre received physical reproductions of the Dagon priest iconography in 1853 and said nothing. This is a documented historical fact about institutional silence, whatever it indicates about the mitres' actual origin. Some creatures were absorbed. One is described in canonical scripture as beyond all human capacity to subdue. The Vatican's own text says no one can hunt it. Number 8. The Leviathan. The year is 1977. You are Jack Corliss, a marine geologist at Oregon State University, and you are aboard the research vessel Nord 250 miles north of the Galapagos Islands. The submersible Alvin has just surfaced from a depth of 8,000 feet. Your colleague John Edmund reviews the water sample analysis and says quietly that the numbers cannot be right. They are right. The water from the hydrothermal vents at the Galapagos Spreading Center contains hydrogen sulfide, carbon dioxide, and temperatures reaching 680 degrees Fahrenheit at the vent mouth conditions that, by the biological models then in use, could support no life at all. The Alvin's cameras recorded something different. Tube worms 12 feet long, white clam beds, and shrimp in concentrations that the standard framework, which required photosynthesis as the foundation of every food chain, could not account for. The findings were published in Science on March 16, 1979, under the title Submarine Thermal Springs on the Galapagos Rift. The paper established that complex ecosystems can operate without sunlight, sustained by chemosynthesis, the conversion of chemical energy, rather than light. The deep ocean, which constitutes approximately 95% of Earth's habitable volume by liquid mass, had been considered largely lifeless below photosynthetic depth. That assumption was shown to be wrong. The Mariana Trench reaches 36,089 feet at Challenger Deep. Organisms have been recovered from it. The Tonga Trench, the Malloy Hole in the Arctic, the Puerto Rico Trench. Each has yielded biological samples at depths and pressures previously considered incompatible with complex life. As of current survey data, less than 25% of the ocean floor has been mapped to a resolution sufficient for identifying geological features of scale. The percentage mapped to a resolution capable of identifying large organisms in deep trench environments is considerably smaller. The Book of Job dedicates the entirety of its 41st chapter to one creature. The chapter is 34 verses. It describes an entity whose scales are sealed together so tightly that no air passes between them. Its breath sets coals alight. Torches pour from its mouth. Smoke rises from its nostrils as from a boiling pot. Its eyes are like the eyelids of the morning, a phrase for which no parallel has been identified in any other ancient Near Eastern text. When it moves through water, its wake glows white. One would think the deep to have white hair. No sword strikes it. No harpoon holds it. No hook draws it out. No net contains it. The mainstream position. Leviathan is the Ugaritic chaos serpent Latin, documented in the 14th century BCE Ball cycle, as Latin the fleeing serpent, Latin the twisting serpent, the mighty one with 7 heads, transferred into the Job narrative as poetic amplification of divine power. The chapter is literary, not zoological. This is credentialed and specific. It does not resolve the specificity of the chapter itself. Bioluminescence is present in 76% of deep-sea organisms surveyed by the Ocean Research and Conservation Association, a figure published by Edith Witter in the Journal of the Marine Biological Association. Hydrothermal vent shrimp of the species Rimicaris exoculata possess a modified bi-eyed photoreceptor organ on their dorsal surface, a heat-sensing structure capable of detecting thermal radiation from vent mouths in the absence of visible light. This is a form of non-visual perception, with no equivalent in surface biology. The deep ocean contains biology that does not operate on the same structural assumptions as surface biology. The Job 41 description, bioluminescent wake, breath that ignites combustibles, scales impermeable to known weapons, describes features that exist, distributed, in the known deep-sea biological catalog. Whether a single organism could combine them has not been investigated by any institutional body with the resources to do so, with one possible exception. In 1953, the Pontifical Academy of Sciences established a private working commission on anomalous phenomena in the maritime environment. The Academy has confirmed the commission's existence. The founding membership included 3 oceanographers, 1 marine geologist, and 1 theologian whose specialty the Academy's own records describe as biblical zoology. This commission was established in 1953. The Alvin hydrothermal vent discovery, the first scientific confirmation of deep sea ecosystems operating outside photosynthetic parameters, came 24 years later. The Commission's records are not in the public archive. The Academy has not released findings, if any exist. Job 41 closes without resolution. God describes the creature in elaborate physical detail, then asks, "Is he not fearful? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. Who then is able to stand before me?" The Lord does not say he hunts the Leviathan. He says no one can. The creature that predates the God described in Genesis was not hunted either. It was written over. 2 syllables into Genesis chapter 1 verse 2. Its name is still there. Number 9. Tiamat. The year is 1876. You are George Smith, a former engraver's apprentice who taught himself cuneiform by spending his lunch hours at the British Museum, and you are holding a clay tablet fragment from the Nineveh archive of the Assyrian king Ashurbanipal. In December 1872, you read aloud the first known extra-biblical account of the flood to the assembled fellows of the Society of Biblical Archaeology, the same flood as Noah's, from a Babylonian tablet. William Gladstone, then Prime Minister of Great Britain, sent a government grant funding your return to Nineveh to find the missing fragment. You found it in 5 days. Now, 4 years later, you are holding something different. 7 clay tablets from the Ashurbanipal library, dated to approximately 1100 BCE, and recording an oral tradition considerably older than the tablets. They begin not with God creating the heavens and the earth. They begin with Tiamat. Tiamat is salt, water. She is the primordial substance, not a created being, but the original medium from which the gods themselves emerged. She is scaled, horned, and tailed. She is a dragon. Her consort is Apsu, the fresh water. Their commingled bodies are the first ocean. In the text which Smith would call the Chaldean account of Genesis, and which would eventually be named the Enuma Elish after its opening words, the younger gods make such noise that Tiamat resolves to destroy them. The young god Marduk offers to fight her on the condition that the other gods grant him supreme authority if he wins. They agree. Marduk kills Tiamat. He splits her body lengthwise. He makes the dome of the sky from one half and the surface of the earth from the other. The Tigris and Euphrates flow from her eyes. The Milky Way is fashioned from her tail. Human beings are created from the blood of her general, Kingu. The world is the dismembered body of a dragon. Smith published the Chaldean account of Genesis in 1876. The parallel between the Enuma Elish and Genesis is not interpretive. It is structural and arithmetical. The Enuma Elish is inscribed across 7 tablets. The 7th tablet contains nothing but the 50 names of Marduk's Sabbath of praise, following 6 tablets of cosmological work. Genesis has 7 days, 6 days of creation, 1 of rest. The architecture is identical. Every element of content has been replaced. The etymological evidence is present in the 2nd verse of the Bible. Genesis 1, verse 2 reads, "And the earth was without form, and void and darkness was upon the face of the deep." The Hebrew word translated as the deep is tehom. William Foxwell Albright of the Johns Hopkins University documented in Yahweh and the Gods of Canaan that Tehomem and Tiamat derive from the same Semitic root, the same consonantal skeleton, the same phonemic origin, the same linguistic ancestor. The word that replaced the Enuma Elish's opening retained the name of the entity the replacement was erasing. What was under Genesis was not removed. It was written over. The Enuma Elish was not marginal. It was the liturgical centerpiece of the Babylonian New Year festival, the Akitu recited annually to the city of Babylon for centuries. The tablets were found in the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal alongside medical texts, astronomical records, and administrative documents. It was a state cosmological text, its recitation an institutional act. The Pontifical Biblical Commission issued a decree in 1902 addressing Genesis's relationship to prior Babylonian cosmological texts. The decree stated that Genesis presents theological truth in popular history form, and that literary parallels with Mesopotamian material do not compromise its doctrinal authority. The decree was a direct institutional response to 30 years of comparative scholarship following Smith's 1876 publication. It was not a denial of the parallels. It was a doctrinal framework for absorbing them without requiring acknowledgement of what was being absorbed. The Vatican received plaster casts of the Enuma Elish tablet series from the British Museum in 18 Praca, 2 years after Smith's publication and 24 years before the Pontifical Biblical Commission's decree. The casts were delivered to the Vatican Library. The original Enuma Elish tablets are in the British Museum, rooms 55 and 56. The accession catalog for the cuneiform tablets from Ashurbanipal's library is publicly searchable through the British Museum's online database. You can request access to the physical tablets. In the second verse of Genesis, the word for the primordial waters carries the name of the dragon, whose dismembered body became the world. The scribes who wrote Genesis knew the Enuma Elish. The word was chosen. The creature whose name is embedded in Genesis could not be erased because it was already inside the replacement text. The dragon in the final book of the canon was placed there as something already on earth, already active, and aware its remaining time has a limit. Number 10. The Dragon of Revelation. The year is 2013. The date is June 13th. You are Jorge Mario Bergoglio, 67 days into your papacy as Pope Francis, and you have just signed a decree from the Congregation for Clergy Formally Donen, recognizing the International Association of Exorcists as an official church organization. The association was founded in 1990 by Father Gabriel Amorth. It had operated for 23 years without canonical status. On July 3, 2014, a second decree from the Congregation for Clergy grants the association full pontifical recognition official standing within the institutional structure of the Catholic Church. The association currently has members in 30 countries. The Vatican Press Office, responding to journalist inquiries in 2017 about the growth of the exorcism ministry, issued a statement acknowledging the increase in trained exorcists worldwide as a pastoral response to rising demand. The current estimated count of Catholic exorcists operating with episcopal authorization, between 500 and 800. The figure has approximately doubled in 2 decades. The operational infrastructure is not historical. It is currently staffed and growing. Revelation 12 describes a great red dragon with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns. Its tail sweeps a third of the stars from the sky and casts them to earth. Michael and his angels fight it. The dragon and its angels are defeated. The text reads, "And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon fought and his angels, and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven." The verse that follows, "Woe to the inhabitants of the earth and of the sea! For the devil is come down unto you, having great wrath, because he knoweth that he hath but a short time." Past tense. The war has already happened. The dragon has already been thrown down. Revelation's own canonical history is contested in ways that most of the Bible is not. Cyril of Jerusalem, Dionysius of Alexandria, John Chrysostom, and the Council of Laodicea all questioned its apostolic authority in the 4th century CE. Martin Luther, in 1522, called it neither apostolic nor prophetic. The Council of Carthage, in 397 CE, included it in the canon. The Council of Trent, in 1563, reaffirmed that decision. The Church voted to include a text describing a dragon thrown from heaven to earth currently present on the ground, with known remaining time as the last word of its canonical scripture. Father Amorth's statements are documented and specific. In An Exorcist, more stories. The devil is not a symbol or a concept, he is a person. In a 2012 interview with Avenir, the Italian Catholic bishop's newspaper. In every case that met the full diagnostic criteria in my experience, there was a non-human intelligence present, not a disturbed human psychology, something else. He conducted an estimated 70,000 exorcism sessions. He held private audiences with Pope John Paul II on multiple occasions. His institutional authorization was never revoked. The Rituale Romanum's expansion documents the operational arc. 21 pages in 1614. 84 pages in 1999. The 1999 revision added categories for entities present in multiples within a single subject. Entities that survive initial exorcism and require sustained engagement over months. entities that imitate divine presence to obstruct identification, and entities that claim jurisdictional authority over specific geographic or institutional domains. These are taxonomic revisions. They were added because practitioners required them. The Pontifical Athenaeum Regina Apostolorum in Rome, a Vatican-approved university, has offered a formal course titled Exorcism and the Prayer of Liberation since 2005. The course runs annually. Priests from 63 countries have attended. The curriculum includes diagnostic criteria for distinguishing psychological disturbance from possession, historical demonological texts, canonical procedures, and clinical psychology in differential diagnosis. The course is accredited. This infrastructure is not a historical artifact. It is currently funded, enrolling students, and operational. What this video has documented across 10 entities is a single institutional pattern. The Vatican's response to specific named beings ranged from mass arrest to translation erasure to publication delay to canonical absorption to taxonomic expansion of its own operational manuals, depending on whether the entity could be suppressed, translated over, delayed, absorbed, or only managed. The methods changed. The pattern did not. The Dragon of Revelation was placed in the final canonical book as something already present on earth, already operating, already counting down time it knows is limited. Whether the institution that placed it there believes this literally or manages the text as institutional tradition is a question the institution has never answered publicly. The Rituale Romanum has 84 pages, where it once had 21. The question of what required those additional 63 pages is one the institution has answered operationally, not theologically. If this kind of documented institutional history is what you came here for, subscribe. It costs nothing, and it keeps this research possible. Leave a like if you watched this far, and leave a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. The geographic spread of this audience is one of the more interesting things we've tracked.